Hey, hi, this is Sandeep, and in the last tutorial we were talking about the attribute settings. So here I have got employees EU and employees view created. Okay, so we were discussing about attribute settings. So basically attribute settings are present in EO also and are present in VO also. More or less these settings are same. Actually, whatever settings you will define here, the same settings are going to be inherited by view objects which is dependent on that EO. So out of this EO, suppose 10 view objects are created. Okay, suppose one of view object is there which shows only these three columns. Okay, another view object is there which shows only these three columns. So multiple view objects can be based on a single entity object, and in that scenario those all view object attributes will inherit the properties from here, from a single point. Okay, so if you see the attributes here, the same are present, and if you go into their properties by right clicking them, this is the view attribute properties here, and their corresponding entity attribute property, if you want to see, there are two ways. You can go ahead here and see them, and that will be totally in disabled mode, and the other way is just to go to the EO itself and see from here. Okay, so it's a long way coming back to the EO and then seeing, so we will stick, we can see right here. So here's the view attribute properties, and more or less these are same as the entity attribute, and these all settings are here. So there are somewhat minor changes here and there. I'll explain you in this. So what happens is, in attribute, in entity attribute, there is a setting called queryable. Okay, so if you check this setting, okay, here in the, if this is check here, this means that in the EO, if you go to the last name, it was checked here, the same was shown there. So if you check this, it will allow, what it will do, that all the view objects which will be based on this entity object, okay, will get this last name column, and if this is checked here, then last name column present in the view object will actually have an option which will provide you to check it or to uncheck it. See, here I have checked it, right? So if you go to its corresponding view object and see, here you will have the option to check it or uncheck it. It's enabled basically. And if you go ahead and disable it, if you say that it's not queryable, apply it in the entity object, right? Then all the view object that are based on this will get, and if they are having this column last name, then this queryable option will not be enabled here. Okay, so what the thing here to remember is the queryable option, if you enable it in the entity object, then you can enable or disable it in the view object, and if you disable it here only, then it will automatically be disabled by default in the entity object, right? So this is how it goes. And so what is the significance of queryable in view object? Now the question is, though you are able to check it or uncheck it or whatsoever in the view object, then what is the significance of this? Okay, so I'll explain the significance of the queryable property of view object later. Just remember right now that if in the entity object it is checked, then in the view object it will provide you with the option, it will give you an option to check or uncheck it, and if it is disabled in the entity object, it will be disabled here by default. Okay, so this is how. And see, now what we'll do, we will go in entity object and we will create one transient attribute. Okay, so transient attribute are those attributes which actually are not going to be persisted in the database. So we are seeing these all columns here. We may want to show one more column, that is the full name, which will be the concatenation of these two. Okay, so what we will do, we can just say plus from here. It will ask you about the attribute name. We are going to name it as full name, and here you can choose. So you see, it's a transient attribute. So first of all, we will just remove the check from here, so it becomes a transient variable. Okay, so now transient variable is defined. Now there are two ways actually to define its value. Okay, one is from here. So from here you have got two options, literal and expression. Okay, so literal means if you put something, then always this will have this static value. Okay, whatever record of the employee you see, you will get this static value as the display. If you say expression, if you want that this full name is going to be the concatenation of the first name and last name, then you have to choose this expression, because that is somewhat that will somewhat give you the functionality to derive this at runtime. Okay, so we'll select this expression and we'll click edit here. So what it will do, it will ask you that what is the expression. So we know that it's the concatenation of these two. Okay, so we can just check it from here, test syntax check passed, that's fine. Okay, and you have to you have to actually tell that this expression is based on what all attributes. Okay, so it's basically based on first name and the last name. Okay, here actually this is the groovy expression that I'm using. So groovy expression is somewhat that you can learn when you go ahead along with me in these tutorials. So basically right here, to get access to the attributes, we can just simply use their names, and we can use the operators like plus, or here in the groovy expression you can use ternary operators also can be used here. For example, if you want to display this name only when salary is greater than, here you have got the salary column. Okay, hire date and salary, yes, salary column is there. So based on the following expression, you can write that only when salary is greater than 2000. Okay, so for those employees which have got salary greater than, let's say, 20,000, this expression will be displayed. Okay, and this is based on these two. So if you select these two, it will tell you that as you are seeing the record, right, then any one of these, if any one of these changes, then ADF framework will update the full name. That is to say, on a UI you will show on the UI it will show you the full name, which will be the concatenation of the first name and last name, right? So if you go ahead and just try to edit over there on the same screen, then automatically it will get refreshed, because it knows that when any one of these is changing, then I have to change this. But if you just put first name, okay, then this refresh will be based on the first name only. Okay, so right now I don't want any condition. Okay, I want to display this name for all the employees regardless of the salary. Okay, so I'll remove this condition. So here I want it always. If you put never, then what it will do, it will actually display at once. When it will display for the first time, it will display you the concatenation, but at the second time, if you try to edit anything and all, then it won't show you the concatenation. That is to say, it won't refresh. So I'll say always, I want always to refresh it when first name is changed. Okay, I can put the last name also, but just to show you in more clarity, I'm not putting it. So it's based on the first name. Okay, so here we have defined that this is going to be the expression. Okay, so now our attribute is ready. So in view object, we will have to add this attribute, so that when you run the application and see view object, it will be visible. Go ahead here, add attribute from entity. Here is the new one which we just now defined. Just shuttle it across. Okay, it is added here and it is ready to go. Now we can just run our application from here. So here is the model tester and here is the data. Okay, so as you see, this Stephen King has been concatenated and the full name is shown here. Okay, so if you edit first name, let's say Stephen 2, then it refreshes here. But if you edit King, then it won't refresh, because we have told ADF framework already that if you, it is based, this concatenation is based only on the first name. Okay, if we had selected the last name over here, you go to the entity object, edit, if you just shuttle the last name across, right, and if you click OK, then now if any one of them you are changing in the UI, then this will get refreshed. Run. So here is your output. As you see, this is the concatenation of first name and last name. If you change here, it's changing here. If you change here also, method is changing here. Okay, I hope you got this concept. And now this was our transient variable, right? So I have shown you one way how it can be populated. Okay, there is one another way how it can be populated. See, this is transient attribute, and if you just remove this, okay, then we are not going to populate now with this method. Okay, we're going to populate it somehow differently. So we'll click apply. Okay, so now the question is, full name is here, but ADF framework doesn't know how to populate it. Okay, so right now if you run it, it will just display you the blank in the full name. So now what we'll do, we'll go to the general we'll go to the Java, and we'll generate the Java classes. See, basically for an entity object, these three classes can be produced and worked on. So these two, entity collection and entity definition, you will rarely be producing on a project. You will generally be producing this entity object. Okay, so if you generate this entity object, it will generate you with this class, which will have actually nothing inside. It will just inherit the EOEMPL. Okay, sorry, entity EMPL. So what we need to do extra is we need to include the accessors. When you say include accessor, what it will do, see, if I don't select this, if I click OK, if you go inside this created class, there is nothing much big enough here. Okay, there is simple class which extends entity IMPL. Okay, so, and here create primary key and some one or two methods are other there. So now we want accessors also in this class. What what accessors will do, they will actually are the accessors of the attributes present in this EO. Okay, so for each and every attribute, see this EOMPL, now it has got these many values here. Okay, so these all are the variables here defined, which are defined as static final, and these all actually now correspond to the columns of the table. So we have got the accessors, we have got these variables through which you can get the access of the attributes. So now we had this attribute, we had defined one attribute, our full name, right? So there should be full name present here. Let's search it. Here is our attribute. Okay, corresponding to this, setters and getters will also be present in this class. Okay, so actually corresponding to each one of these attributes, setter and getters will be present in this class. So let's see the setter of getter of first name, let's say. Okay, so if you want to see first name, here is your getter. So what it will do, it will actually call this method from the mother class, and it will pass this argument, and it will get that method in the mother class will return you an object which it will convert to the string and then return this whole stuff. We are interested right now in full name. So here is our get full name. It's actually calling, just simply calling the mother class method and returning this value. We don't want this, right? We want to return concatenation of first name and last name. This is what we want. So we have just commented this out and we have added this. This will get first name is method defined here only in this class. It will get you the first name, and this will get you the last name. This will concatenate it, and this whole method is going to return the concatenation. So now the concatenation for this has been defined. I mean, how the population of this attribute is going to take place is defined in this class. Now if you go ahead and run the application, here is your output, and see the full name is concatenation of these two. Okay, so now we have achieved this programmatically. So this explains you how we can create a transient variable here. Now coming to the view object, in view object also you can create a transient variable or a calculated variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and create, we'll just delete this variable. Okay, just to have a simplicity what we created. full name. So earlier, now I just showed you how I created the full name attribute in EO and how I was able to inherit it here in the view, and then I was able to show it, okay, in the output. So now we want we want the same thing, but now I can define the full name attribute here only. Now I'm gonna define one transient attribute. There can be two types of attribute, one is transient or one is SQL calculated. So if I go ahead, add attribute, sorry, just add this, then it will ask you what is the name. I'll give the full name. I can provide static value or expression. So I'm gonna go ahead with expression, and same thing. Always this kind of thing, this kind of functionality you saw at the entity level also. So I've selected first name concatenation of this always. Okay, so now this attribute is going to be calculated based on this expression. Okay, and one more thing I would like to do is okay, that's fine for me. Updatable is never. I don't want the user to update this. Okay, and now run this. So here's the output, in which you can see this attribute is the concatenation of first name and last name. Okay, so this is how we have achieved it. We will now again go to the properties of this attribute. Okay, so this time we use this functionality. This was actually transient attribute, so it can be SQL calculated also. In that case, if you want it to calculate with the help of SQL, you can say map to column or SQL. Okay, actually when it is not present, it means this attribute is a transient attribute, okay, whose value can be derived from here. Now if you mark this, this becomes maybe this tells the ADF that this attribute may be mapped to an attribute of the entity object, or it can be SQL expression. So we are going to define expression also here. This is the SQL expression, so here column names will be used. We can put space between, and we can say its attribute name to be an alias name to be full name. Okay, and we'll select in if you click selected in query, then I'll show you what is the significance of this in just 2 minutes. So map to column, this apply, and okay, now it will show you the same thing. I'm gonna run it. Here's the output, and you see the same output is there. The only difference is right now this attribute has become SQL calculated attribute. See here, calculated, right? Calculated attribute. So this is how we define it, and if you go to this last name, this thing I was about to explain you. Okay, this property selected in query, basically if you click here, then the query of the view object, in that it will be selected. If you uncheck it, it won't be selected in the query. See, right now it is selected, so it is present in the query last name, right? If you go ahead and remove the check on it, then click OK and come back to the query, you see it's gone. Last name is gone, right? So this is the significance of it. We can modify the query from here. I hope this explains you well about the configurations of entity object and view object. I'll see you in the next